Hello everyone, and welcome to BattleTech Faction Briefings. Today, we are exploring a mercenary unit that I've always liked. They began as a house military unit, and would leave to form their own mercenary team. They are one of the original 5 Battle Droids mercenaries. Today, we are talking about the one and only Hansen's Roughriders. The Roughriders use a unique skull design with horns and fangs, which is placed upon a shield. Around 3059, the insignia got a slight redesign, but kept the same theming. The mercenary insignia is placed on the mech's front torso, aerofighter fuselage, and vehicle flanks. For parade colors, the Roughriders use midnight blue with smoke gray highlights. It is stated that in the Dark Age they use a more typical blue and white color scheme, but this may be a mistake. When in combat, they prefer a brown and dun colored camouflage. However, they will adjust their camouflage to match the region when necessary. By the Ill Clan era, the Roughriders would generally stick with their standard blue color scheme. There are several fiction entries about Hansen's Roughriders, which fills out their history. If you want to skip spoilers, then go to the time listed. The history of the Roughriders begins in the Federated Suns. The name of the Roughriders was the battalion's nickname, but their parent unit is unclear. After the assassination of First Prince Peter Davian, the new First Prince started targeting threats and acting with extreme paranoia. In 2961, Colonel Ludwig Hansen would flee the Federated Suns due to the purges against disloyal units. While they were not disloyal to the First Prince, Colonel Hansen feared what might happen due to Andrew Davian's erratic behavior. Thus, his battalion fled into Lyran territory, and then into the Free Worlds League. Upon entering the FWL, the battalion would join up with the 12th Atrean Dragoons. This was done because the Dragoons were led by Major General Gerhard Hansen, a distant relative of Ludwig Hansen. This would strengthen the unit and make the 12th a heavyweight mech team for a time. When the Marik Civil War started in 3014, the 12th Atrean Dragoons sided with Anton Marik in his mission to dethrone his brother. However, several higher-ranked officers chose to leave the 12th rather than revolt against the Captain General. The first target for the 12th was McKenna. Then they moved on to Semenya. They did not have any problems in the early war. Their next target was Matheron, where they would face off with the 11th Atrean Dragoons. They would get caught in a hunt for the 11th due to the 11th's use of quick hit-and-run maneuvers. Over the months of battle, the 11th would get worn down to about half strength. The arrival of Smithson's Chinese bandits would give the 11th enough extra firepower to turn the tables on the 12th. It was the arrival of Beta and Gamma regiments of Wolf's Dragoons that won the world for the rebels. The 11th were defeated and captured, but the Chinese bandits would flee the world upon learning the Wolf's Dragoons had arrived. It is believed the 12th's commander, Francis Ferdinand, was killed during the fighting. Gerhard Hansen, the grandson of Ludwig Hansen, would take command of the damaged 12th as the war continued. The 12th would work with Beta and Gamma, as well as the 3rd Ducal Guards, to attack Callaway in order to stop the advance of the Loyalist forces. The 12th lost a dropship, which wiped out an entire company before they landed on the world. Then the Ducal Guards and the 12th took heavy damage in the fighting. The Ducal Guards were crushed, and the 12th were forced to surrender in November 3014. At this point, the 12th Atrean Dragoons would be worn down to 2 functional companies. After the war, the remnants of the 12th, alongside other angry former Free Worlds League soldiers, including a unit from the 1st Atrean Dragoons, would group together on Ilion. There would be a battle on the world, either between the former Free Worlds League military forces, or perhaps between the FWLM troops and some other military force. When the battle was complete, Hansen's Roughriders would be the result of the newly united former Free Worlds League soldiers. What happened in the years after they were formed remains unclear. It is believed they took a contract from an enemy of the Free Worlds League to assault New Olympia. In the 3-week-long campaign, they would destroy 2 regiments of local forces. This was a humiliating defeat for the Free Worlds League, and heavy damage was caused to the local military academy. The The success of the Roughriders gave them some renown and helped them secure a contract with the Lyran Commonwealth in 3018. In 3019, the skill of the Roughriders would be put to the test. Lyran intelligence would discover a plan to invade Hesperus II using the entirety of the Wolf's Dragoons. The Roughriders would be sent out alongside anyone else the Lyrans could muster prior to the Dragoon invasion. The team would include the 6th, 15th, and 24th Lyran Guards, 3rd Royal Guards, and the Hansen Hotheads. The Lyran forces were the initial defense, slowing down the Dragoons so they could reinforce the Defiance Industries factory complex. After a week of fighting, the Roughriders came across a team of the 7th Commando, the Dragoon Special Ops Unit, and killed several of them, including their commander. This limited aspects of the Dragoon strategy. In the course of a week, the Lyran forces would retreat closer to the factory complex. The Roughriders were the last to cross the bridges along the Erawan River. The bridges were then destroyed to prevent an easy crossing for the Dragoons. The Lyran defenders built a defensive line across the Erawan River and were able to repel all Dragoon attacks with the use of airstrikes and good defensive positioning. The Dragoons found a hole in the Lyran defenses and sent a team through a narrow pass that led to the main factory on Hesperus. The Roughriders were able to hold off the Black Widow Company and kept the factory safe, even when the Dragoons' Delta and Epsilon regiments showed up as backup. The Dragoons had to retreat, and the world was held at great cost. The 24th Lyran Guards were almost completely destroyed. After the battle, Hansen's Roughriders would be transferred to Suk II in order to rebuild. They would hold off raids by the Draconis Combine, 2 of which came in 3017, one by Wilson's Hussars, and the other by a DCMS team made up of several Phoenix Hawk Lambs. Despite some turmoil and occasional terrorist attacks, the world worked well as the Roughrider base. In 3020, the world of Solaris 7 would get raided by the 33rd Marik Militia and Seguin's Strikers. They used heavy air raids to soften up the defenses. Hansen's Roughriders worked with the local forces to hold off the attack. By the end, the 33rd Marik Militia would be destroyed. The battle is notable as the first deployment of the Patton heavy tank, which the Roughriders tested and later incorporated into their forces alongside the Rommel heavy tank. The Roughriders would be sent out on several raids into the Free Worlds League, including a minor raid on Shiloh. However, their biggest raid in this era was the capture of the world of Severin in 3024. They worked alongside Winfield's brigade and the 13th Lyran Guards to fight the local Kurita forces. The defenders would use Mech Buster arrow fighters to hold off the mercenaries and nearly destroyed a company of Winfield's regiment. The Lyrans would win, but after the battle, the Nesmith Nuclear Industries plant exploded, covering a city in radioactive material, which took years to clean up and caused many deaths. In 3028, prior to the Fourth Succession War, Hansen's Roughriders would go on a mission to Rosetta in order to secure an SLDF depot, which had been discovered via the Helm Memory Core. Once on world, they had to dig into the ground to find the old base. Inside the base, they discovered 27th century mechs and a stockpile of Starfire Headhunter missiles. This was a tight operation with only 2 battle mechs, 2 heavy tanks, and a platoon of light infantry, making work slower than it could have been. Upon finding the cache, things started to go wrong. First, the locals arrived with Pegasus hover tanks. They put up a good fight, and in the process, the Roughriders lost an Atlas due to its sinking into molten sulfur during the battle. During this operation, a rare celestial positioning occurred that caused the surface of the world to heat up, and the sulfur plains turned into a sea of molten sulfur that covered the Star League base, keeping it hidden away for years to come. The Roughriders barely escaped and left some supplies behind. Hansen's Roughriders were brought right back into the fray when they returned from their mission. They would work alongside Narhal's raiders to attack the world of Wheel. They battled the Tooth of Ymir mercenaries, who asked for a more ritualistic battle to avoid collateral damage and reduce civilian casualties. The Tooth of Ymir would be defeated in honorable combat. The second wave would have the Roughriders attacking Hainfield, where they took the world for the Lyrans. This was a major mission because Hainfield had been taken by the Combine in the early 3020s, and the Lyrans had failed to retake it until the Roughrider victory in 3029. Then, Hansen's Roughriders worked with the Waco Rangers to take Satalis. The 9th Rosselhog Regulars would hold off both mercenary regiments for months. It was a long battle, but the mercenaries would eventually deal heavy damage to the 9th and take the world in early 3030. The Roughriders would take time to recover after the war. However, they still pulled raids when needed. One of the most notable was an assault on Sternwerda in 3035. To hit the world, the Roughriders went through the Free Rosselhog Republic. They would face off with the 5th Benjamin Regulars and a battalion from the 2nd Sword of Light. The Combine tried to draw the Roughriders into a trap while waiting for DCMS reinforcements. The Roughriders turned the tables by attacking the landing enemy dropships, destroying the troops as they disembarked. After dealing heavy damage to the Combine, the mercenaries left the world. Shortly after their victory, the Roughriders were transferred to the Federated Suns. This return was less awkward than the Hansen family feared, and the Roughriders were given garrison duty on the world of Bromhead in the Capellan March. This was easy work on a world that had very few problems. In 3038, the Roughriders would lead a raid on Dela Cruz in the Draconis Combine. Despite the victory, the Roughriders lost longtime member Melinda Carlisle when fighting Sorensen's Sabres. Before the war broke out, Hansen's Roughriders were transferred to Al Ghul. From there, they would join the assault on Pike 4. The team would be made up of the 13th Lyran Guards and Hansen's Roughriders. Initially, they fought the local guards made up of industrial mechs and armor. The mechs defeated the armor, and their artillery destroyed the industrial mechs. However, the 5th Sword of Light and 24th Dairon Regulars arrived and pushed the Lyrans back. The 17th Sky Rangers arrived to assist the AFFC troops. The Roughriders faced off with the 5th Sword of Light and took heavy losses in the fight. In November, their contract ran out, and the Roughriders left the world. The Lyran forces would also get a recall order, and the world remained in Combine hands. As the Roughriders left the world, they assisted a Combine citizen named Johnny Tessel with salvaging a Lyran Thunderbolt. After that, he joined the mercenaries. The bad performance of the mercenary forces led Gerhard Hansen to postpone his retirement due to the general view that his son, Wolfgang Hansen, was not ready to be a commander. Gerhard would not retire until 5 years later, when Wolfgang's reputation had improved. The Federated Commonwealth would start a new contract with the Roughriders. They returned to their station on Al Ghul, where they saw little action for quite some time. Wolfgang Hansen would use this time to improve training and strengthen the unit. It is noted that in 3044, Hansen's Roughriders would be on a pirate hunting mission on the world of Venaria. This was an easy job that allowed the Roughriders to show off their newly trained skills. By the end of the decade, Hansen's Roughriders would be transferred to Bromhead on the periphery border. The garrison of Bromhead was far from the clan invasion corridor. The Roughriders saw no action during the initial clan invasion. It is noted that they did serve as a defensive unit during Operation Guerrero in 3057, but the extent of their work is unclear. However, in 3059, Catherine Steiner Davian offered them a position on the Clan Jade Falcon occupation zone border. The Roughriders gladly took the mission and successfully held off several raids by Clan Jade Falcon. When the FedCom Civil War broke out, there were 3 units stationed on Bromhead: the 2nd Davian Guards, the 22nd Avalon Hussars, and Hansen's Roughriders. The leadership of the 3 units discussed what to do. The Hussars and Roughriders decided to support Catherine Steiner Davian. The Davian Guards sided with Victor, and not long after, minor brawls broke out between the Guards and the Hussars. The fights got broken up, and not long after that, the Davian Guards left the world rather than get into a firefight with their previous allies. In 3064, Hansen's Roughriders went to Taigeta. From there, they attempted to capture the world of Ponpor. Hansen's Roughriders would join members of the Capellan March Militia and face off with the Fighting Uruk-hai and 2nd Albion Training Cadre. The fighting would continue until 3065, when the Lexington Combat Group would arrive to assist the Allied forces. The pro-Victor forces had difficulty coordinating, allowing the Loyalist forces to perform a fighting withdrawal. The Fighting Uruk-hai would suffer heavy casualties due to both the Loyalists and friendly fire from their allies when they gave chase to the Roughriders without proper orders. The Albion cadre would also be shattered, and the Lexington Combat Group took heavy damage during the Loyalist escape. The Roughriders would escape to Nunivak. Meanwhile, the Uruk-hai would get into an argument with the Lexington Combat Group. The Uruk-hai would steal a dropship and battle salvage before fleeing the world. The Roughriders would see little action during the rest of the war, and remain on Nunivak until near the end of the war. The Fighting Uruk-hai would find themselves in a contract dispute with the Federated Suns after the events on Ponpor. This would cause them to leave Federated Suns territory and enter the Taurian Concordat. This action was seen as an act of war against the Taurian Concordat, and they immediately attacked the Federated Suns in January 3067. Due to this, George Hasek would offer the soon-to-be unemployed Roughriders a contract to protect the border. The Taurian Concordat sent the 2nd Taurian Lancers to attack the world of Bromhead in August 3067, right as the new contract was being negotiated. The Roughrider infantry that had remained on their former base would hold their own against the Periphery invaders, giving the Taurian Lancers several humiliating defeats. In response, the Taurian Lancers overran the Roughrider base and slaughtered many Roughrider dependents that were living there. This would later be known as the Bromhead Massacre. At the time of the massacre, the Roughriders were on Ponpor, a brief layover as they moved to their future posting on Lindsay. They would learn of the massacre, which included the death of Colonel Wolfgang Hansen's wife and children. Thus, they rushed out to fight the Concordat rather than go to their contracted garrison. The Roughriders were out for revenge and vowed to destroy the Taurian Concordat. However, they lacked their own jump ship to begin their campaign of carnage. When they arrived on Lindsay, they discovered that Taurian troops had captured the world. The Roughriders used very little strategy and just rushed the Pallades Lancers and Taurian garrison forces. They dealt heavy damage and took out all but one bridge from the capital. When the Taurian forces tried to escape across the remaining bridge, the Roughriders launched an artillery strike that destroyed the bridge and the majority of the remaining Taurian forces. When the battle was over, less than a battalion of the Taurian forces remained. They would escape, and the Pallades Lancers would cease to function as a unit. By the end of the year, Hansen's Roughriders would be garrisoning the world of Midale. In early 3070, Dedrickson's Devils, a pirate unit, arrived under the flag of the Taurian Guards. Hansen's Roughriders tore them apart, and only relented when their AFFS liaison told them that the invaders were just pirates. A third of the pirates escaped Midale, but Hansen's Roughriders took no prisoners and killed every pirate they came across during the fight. Not long after that, the 2nd Taurian Lancers attacked Midale. The Roughriders were brutal in their attack on the Lancers, attacking their dropship and taking no prisoners. They would use the captured dropships to trap the Taurian Lancers and annihilate them. The only survivors were the soldiers that were captured by the local militia and Davian intelligence, who hid them from the Roughriders. The Capellan March militia staff got tired of dealing with the Roughriders and their issues with the Concordat, so they gave them a jump ship and let them go on a counter raid against the Periphery nation that had been hitting the Federated Suns border. In March 3071, the Roughriders made their way to Electra, which had been captured by the Concordat recently. The Taurian media was able to spread stories about the Roughriders as ruthless invaders. The Roughriders used artillery to weaken their enemies that had built a base in a canyon. By the end of the fighting, the Roughriders took a good amount of ammo and other supplies they had found, including a stockpile of atomic weapons. When the Taurian forces attempted a withdrawal from the world, the Roughriders used atomics to take them out. This caused outrage, but the Mercenary Review Board put no sanctions against Hansen's Roughriders. After the fighting, the Roughriders would learn that some captives had been taken. One of the prisoners was revealed to be an agent of the Word of Blake. From the agent, they learned that some of their dependents had been taken from Bromhead, which gave the Roughriders the hope that some of their family was still alive. Despite the fact that this sounded like a trap, the search for the captives became their new mission. Their campaign would continue with the raid on MacLeod's land in 3074. In the 2-day attack, they destroyed most of their heavy industry. The Roughriders returned to Brusset prior to 3075. Then, in early 75, the world would get attacked by the 4th Taurian Lancers. The Lancers used atomics on the capital and tried to bombard the Roughrider base. However, the Roughriders are hard to kill, and they would ambush the Lancers after they landed, destroying the Taurian unit. Hansen's Roughriders would then be officially used as part of the counteroffensive to the invasion by the Concordat. Their first stop was liberating Hyalite. They used bombardment to shatter Gordon's armored cavalry. After liberating the world, they moved on to Amber Grove. The Roughriders used conventional and atomic weapons to destroy the local defenders, and spent time destroying all industry and infrastructure on the world. They would then assist the AFFS with taking back the world of Warren. The ferocity of Hansen's Roughriders would cause the Taurian Concordat to hunt them down with a warship. The TCS Vendetta would bombard Hyalite and then continue to destroy worlds in their search for the Roughriders. In July 3075, the Roughrider campaign continued to the world of Perdition. The local mercenary defenders, Longwood's Bluecoats, would surrender and join the Roughriders. Then, the local industry and infrastructure were completely destroyed before the Roughriders moved on. They then hit the world of Grossbach. They moved on to Sterope, where they didn't destroy the factories. Instead, they plundered them so they could continue their campaign of revenge. In April 3076, they arrived on Warren to resupply. However, the TCS Vendetta arrived in June. Outmatched, the Roughriders fled to Cooterville. The Vendetta bombarded Warren before arriving at Cooterville in July. This caused the Roughriders to retreat to Firgrove. The Vendetta bombarded Cooterville and gave chase. The Fox-class warship New Sirius met the Vendetta at Firgrove and defeated the Taurian warship. The Battle of Firgrove would more or less mark the end of the war between Hansen's Roughriders and the Taurian Concordat. It is likely the Roughriders learned at this point that the Word of Blake was involved in the Bromhead massacre, which changed their primary target. The Roughriders would join the coalition forces in the liberation of Terra, but the unit would be hit by an atomic attack while in Texas in 3078. Wolfgang Hansen and slightly more than a company's worth of mercenaries survived the attack. They would leave Terra and be sent to recover on Carmax. By 3085, the Roughriders would be stationed on Glenmora. They would be down to 35% effectiveness and be too weak to go on any major mission. At some point after their contract ended, the Roughriders would go to Galatea and set up a base there to offer their services to anyone interested and to train up new soldiers to join their unit. In 3134, the Roughriders would be hired to raid the world of Alka Lurops. It was a mostly uneventful raid, but it would get them involved in a much bigger battle. Their client had aims to take over the small mining world and would then contract them to capture and hold the world, after the locals had denied his claim of leadership. Reluctantly, the Roughriders sent a battalion led by Lauren J. Hansen to the world. They found limited hostilities from the locals, which was only a cover for the militia to build up their strength secretly. When the Roughriders' client arrived with a group of armed thugs known as the Black and Reds, Major Hansen was put into an odd position. The idea of brutally subjugating a world was not something he wanted to be involved with. The Roughriders had a minor skirmish with the local militia and would gain intelligence from the locals that showed that their client was planning to betray them. Thus, the Roughriders worked with the locals to stop the would-be tyrant and destroy his war crime committing personal army. After the mission, the Roughriders returned to Galatea to train and look for more work. In 3141, the world of Galatea was raided. The Roughrider infantry would endure heavy fighting to protect their base. The Roughriders used transports purchased from Clan Seafox in previous years to maneuver around and fight the Jade Falcon raiders. The Roughrider Armor Company, the Old Guard, used bulwark assault vehicles to block the roads into Galatea City. They held off 2 trinaries of Clan Jade Falcon mechs for several hours, destroying 9 mechs before they were pulled back and the Roughriders' main mech forces finished the job. After a second Jade Falcon raid in 3144, the mercenaries of Galatea brought together the Galatean Defense Force. The team was made up of a variety of units and soldiers. Hansen's Roughriders, while only at 65% effectiveness, took up the task of training the volunteers into a solid 2-regiment force. The worlds of Alcor, Mizar, Sirma, and Galatea formed the Galatean League. Not long after that, the Roughriders would become the core of the defense force for these 4 worlds. In 3150, the Republic of the Sphere would hire Hansen's Roughriders to train their militia forces in preparation for a potential clan assault. They would arrive on Australia, but a month into training, Clan Wolf attacked. After 3 days, the Roughriders had to pull away from Sydney and moved towards the Blue Mountains. Epsilon Galaxy gave chase, pushing them towards Melbourne. The Old Guard would sacrifice themselves so that the Roughriders could escape Australia. They would flee to Alaska, where they would fight Clan Wolf at Anchorage. The Wolf Beta Galaxy cornered the Roughriders. They were saved by the Grey Gunny Lancers, who had lost their commander in the fighting. Both teams boarded dropships and fled the world, leaving it to Clan Wolf. After their escape from Terra, the Roughriders would return to the remains of the Federated Suns. They took up Julian Davian's offer of land and titles for mercenaries who joined their military forces. They would raid planets in the Dragon's Tongue region as a distraction during the liberation of New Avalon. Lyran Hansen became the Duke of Tybalt. He began rebuilding his forces while hiring the first Kearney Highlanders to defend his world until the Roughriders were back on their feet. In 3152, the Roughriders had rebuilt enough to take a contract to defend Robinson. Thus far, they have faced no battles, but while on Robinson, they started recruiting new soldiers to build up their regiment and prepare for the challenges of the new era. Hansen's Roughriders have a good reputation for a reason. They went from a group of under-equipped rebels to an elite heavyweight mercenary force. They survived many hardships and won't be disbanding anytime soon. They may not always win, but they will always be remembered by those they fight. There are many heroes amongst the Roughriders. Here are a few of the most notable. Gerhardt Hansen. He took command of the rebel 12th Atrean Dragoons after their commander died on Matheron. After the Civil War, he united a group of rebels and created Hansen's Roughriders. He planned on retiring in 3039, but the performance of his son made him stick around and help his son become a true commander. He would retire in 3044. He piloted a Cyclops. Wolfgang Hansen. The son of the original commander, he got a bad reputation for the heavy losses on Pike 4. He would slowly build his reputation up and become a strong leader who led the team in the campaign against the Taurian Concordat. He also survived a nuclear attack in Texas by the word of Blake and rebuilt his unit in the early Dark Age. He piloted a Cyclops. Melinda Carlisle. She was a member of McFinney's Manglers, and later Snord's Irregulars. At some point, she joined Hansen's Roughriders. She was known for hunting Panther battle mechs, and her massive dislike for the Draconis Combine. She would die in a duel on De La Cruz in 3038. She piloted a Panther named Tooth Puller. Johnny Tessel. An industrial mech pilot who was conscripted into the defense of Pike 4. He would get shot down and steal a Panther from the 5th Sword, which he used to defeat a Lyran Thunderbolt. He would join the Roughriders and be known for PPC headshots. He piloted a TDR-5SS Thunderbolt. Jake Blanchard. a tank battalion commander who served with the 12th Atrean Dragoons. He kept his battalion near the main mech forces to provide maximum support. In the Battle of Sternwerda, he led an assault against arriving Combine reinforcements. He had the highest kill count of anyone in that campaign. This would include destroying a dropship. He piloted a Bulldog medium tank named Little Softy. Celeste Rio, a skilled pilot who held her own against Natasha Kerensky on Hesperus, though she did lose. She would fight with valor on Shiloh, where she shot down Aerofighters during a drop operation. After her many battles, she was left with a cybernetic arm and shifted to becoming a leader in the training battalion. She piloted a Shadowhawk. Afaren Ora Lehigh, a Taurian-born mech warrior who left her home with her husband who had joined the Roughriders. When the Dependents were attacked on Bromhead, she survived the attack. But when her husband died in combat, she took up his contract and fought for revenge against her own people. She pilots an Atlas. Loren J. Hansen. He is a calm and deep-thinking commander who rose up in rank during the Dark Age, eventually becoming the regimental commander and Duke of Tybalt. His focus was on legacy and reputation, and wasn't the typical rough-and-tumble mech warrior the mercenaries were known for. He pilots a Koshi and later a Regent. Torvald Stendhal, a descendant of Rosselhog refugees who grew up on Galatea. He joined the Roughriders during the formation of the Galatean Defense Force. He would be a survivor of the Battle of Terra and holds a grudge against the clans. He pilots an Annihilator. Hansen's Roughriders are primarily a heavyweight unit, thus they mainly use heavy mechs with some mediums and assault units, and the occasional light mech. They have a tendency to use close-range combat instead of long-range weaponry. Due to their time in the Free Worlds League and Federated Commonwealth, there is a huge variety of mechs they have access to. They would receive upgrades throughout the years, especially in the 3050s and 3060s, and be fully upgraded to modern standards by 3067. When it comes to armor, they are best known for using Patton and Rommel heavy tanks, and are noted for being the test team for the Patton. The forces of the Roughriders are good at coordinating their attacks and working as a team with mechs, armor, and aerospace. Interestingly, they do not separate out command lances for their battalions or companies. The armor units primarily use heavy tanks and function as independent units that change strategy based on the commander. Early on, their Aerofighters began as lights and mediums, but over time they added fast heavy fighters and bombers. The infantry was originally used for defensive operations protecting their base and the Roughrider dependents. They would start using battle armor in the 3060s and become a part of the assault operations after the Bromhead massacre. The infantry would have a good amount of transports and mechanized infantry options. A unique aspect of the unit was a team made up of retired soldiers and volunteers called the Old Guard. They would become the new guards of the dependents after the massacre and would become a specialized home defense armor team in the Dark Age. Beyond their main forces, the Roughriders also had at least 2 dropships, but usually had to borrow or hire a jump ship to conduct their operations. Since Hansen's Roughriders have been around since 1984, they have many stories. The Roughriders are not the lead of some of these stories, but do have a point of view in Starfire, Blood Rage, and Patriot's Stand. However, they are not the protagonists of Patriot's Stand. When it comes to sourcebooks, there are many options for filling in the history of the Roughriders, though some of them are just location and composition data. Beyond that, they appear in several technical readouts, but some of the stories that feature the Roughriders are reused. These include the Panther and the Shadowhawk. I've been wanting to cover Hansen's Roughriders for a long time. They are one of my favorite mercenary units, not just because they were Anton Marik supporters, but also because of all the wild adventures they have. It probably also helps that they were involved in MechWarrior 2 Mercenaries. If you're not a fan of the Roughriders, I hope my briefing has changed your mind. However, in Combat Manual Mercenaries, there is a mission for the Roughriders to fight the Black Widows on Hesperus, except for the fact that they gave it the wrong date. Newsflash Catalyst, the Battle of Hesperus occurred in June 3019, not May 3021. Also, it dawned on me that I have only one of the original 84 mercenary lineup to cover in a BattleTech faction briefing. As for painting up a squad of Roughriders, that's an easy choice. There's a force pack to get a head start. The big question is how to paint them. Midnight Blue and Smoke, Brown and Dun, or the supposed Dark Age Blue and White. If you have a painted up set of Roughriders, I'd love to see them. February will take us into the Federated Suns with the first FedCom RCT, aka the first Federated Suns Lancers. Then I will be looking at Brian's Legion. In March, I will be looking at the Draconis Combine and another mercenary unit. A big thank you to all the people who've been watching my videos. I love making these, and I hope you love watching them. May your weapons stay hot and your reactors stay cool. Until next time, I'll see you at the tavern.